welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. As usual, this is one of my favorite until we start talking and the guest mentioned a couple of things, and I'm like, that's really interesting. So, one of my things that I do here, Massimo, as a custom, is to welcome our guests because I personally deem you're coming with several things very expensive. Time is such a precious commodity that many of us, I misused some of it, but it helped me in my training. So I'm able to understand the value of it. And so it is a precious commodity. The other is the story, our journey. It made us who we are today. It housed so much information, wisdom, pain, all of those beautiful things that cause us to mature to be who we are. And so we are honored that you're here to share both of them with us. And we want to welcome you to Threads of Enlightenment. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much, Ken, for your time. I agree wholeheartedly with you. I believe that time is the most precious commodity because it is the one thing that none of us can create more of. And that's why time is so precious.
Man. That's 24 hours each.
That's right. Nobody gets any more.
Yeah, you can't argue at all. No favoritism here, I tell people. There's no favoritism here. You got to honor the time that you have and become wise. And that's a journey. So tell the folks the things by which you serve, because I tell everyone that have been listening to this podcast that that's the place we want to get to, because it is such a powerful, honor, humble place to live from and to be, that until you get there, you will not understand what I'm talking about. Tell the folks the stuff that by which you serve.
Absolutely. So, again, thank you for the nice, kind welcome. I'm Massimo Rigotti, and I help addicts find their unique flavor of confidence to attain sobriety and maintain it. So my journey story is somewhat interesting in the fact that I'm bipolar, and I went to drugs and alcohol to self-medicate for most of my life, and found myself finally able to sober up, and that's an interesting story I'm sure we'll dive into. But in finding that, I created my own path. I found that things that others were using didn't work for me. And as I created my own methodology, the S.O.B.E.R. methodology, that ultimately led into, boy, this is working well for me. Others want to know what I'm doing. I ended up writing a book, which came out earlier this year called Flavors of Confidence. And then I made the decision to kind of wind down my business consulting operation and begin speaking and taking my message out to everyone full time. So that's what I do now.
That's awesome. I tell people that the journey is designed for every single person on this planet. I think we're somewhat over 8 billion or more. And I believe personally that it is designed, Massimo, I believe it's designed for 8 billion people to go through and come out with something different. And each one of us loving the fact that their perspective is so different compared to other ones. And so that's why I think this lifestyle, if you will, is ever so beautiful, because it's afforded to everyone who wants to make that journey. One of our custom is to go back to the beginnings of the beginnings, as they say. And that's the place by which we reside. And that location is called family after we were brought from the hospital. We are placed within this space for a couple of years so that we can get acclimated into life. Introduce us to your family as to what that unit was like while you resided there.
Absolutely. So I was born into a kind of dreadful situation, I guess is the best way to describe it. So my mom and my father split before I was born. And she was in kind of escape mode of a not so great relationship.
Yeah.
And that could have turned into a very horrible upbringing. And instead, an amazing man entered her life, or re-entered her life, when I was 3 years old. And they got married, and he adopted me and raised me as his own and provided me a really strong foundation, which I built off of. But I still wondered about my father, and that caused some unique kind of. I didn't know really what that was causing to me until later in life, but
Yeah.
ultimately it was a fear of abandonment, and that's something that I struggle with even today, even though I know it is the number one driver that caused me to go to drugs and alcohol.
Yeah,
So
it's a fascinating thing with, I believe, because with my children, when they were in my wife's womb, I spoke to them. And I believe that they recognized my voice when they were born. I told you I was there. I said hello to, and they immediately turned around. And I believe that the trauma that your mom and your dad went through, I believe that some of that, because it's an energetic transfer, was deposited into you as a young'un, as they say, while you're coming out and
yes.
growing. And again, we are energy, and so um, in that space, I believe you can sense and recognize that energetic feel that you're used to, and we label it. We give it a terminology of abandonment. So here you are. This wonderful human spirit came into your life, adopted you and your mom, and your family is growing. Within that space, what was your reaction to this new energy there and your mom and all of that? How did you manage that relationship as you were coming up as a young buck in that space?
I really accepted it and, for lack of a better term, adopted it. But so I walked through that space and really latched on. So
Mhm.
when my dad came into my life, he took real he took me on as his own.
Yeah,
Completely. I got experiences that my two younger siblings did not. I
yeah,
went everywhere with him. He took me to business meetings, to different events, and got experiences that were amazing. And
yeah,
that was a good fundamental laydown that created unique experiences that most people wouldn't get. And
yeah.
so I was blessed, really blessed, and he always nurtured me in a big way. What do you need? How can I help? And he was always there for me. So it was kind of amazing, really.
Oh, that's awesome, man. And how did that translate, that love and honor and respect that you received from him? How did that translate to with your relationship with others, your friends, those that are close by, family, stuff like that? How were you relating with the outside world other than your dad and mom?
I really struggled, and I struggled to make friendships for most of my life. I
Hmm.
didn't feel like I was good enough, so I had this kind of dichotomy going on whereby I felt very accepted and loved by my dad,
Yeah,
yet at the same time, I felt I had this tear where I knew that my father had left me.
yeah,
And why had he left me? Was I not this? Was I not that? Maybe I was not. Maybe I was an idiot. Maybe I was too ugly.
yeah.
What was that reason? And I was in that search for that reason for so long. And it's interesting that it caused the struggle that it did, and it
Hmm.
was that deep, because I had all the makings of a fantastic family, but that one missing piece caused me to search for
Yeah.
fulfillment, completeness in my life.
Yeah, I telling you, I've interviewed so many people, and that missing piece is we tend to negate the impact of the emotional trauma that is translated from the mom to that baby. Um, because I believe that all trauma is emotional and it is stored, and one becomes familiar with it. Here you are being affected by that emotion, and yet you're receiving tremendous of love and respect. And but it was an imprint upon you that was residing there that caused you to react certain ways. So here you are, you're navigating life, you're familiar with the yin and yangs of life and the pain and the love. And as you're moving through um, life, you mentioned that your dad had taken you to business meetings and stuff like that. How did that impact you? Because you are now moving forward in your life and you're heading into high school and looking to your future, if you will. How did the exposure to that begin to formulate your mind and your thoughts? Because now you're going to probably want to emulate that. So how did you
Yeah.
begin to do that?
Yeah, I tell you, my dad, though he's not an entrepreneur, has
Hmm.
a real kind of entrepreneurial streak about him.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that if things were different or had been accepted differently at the time that he was coming up, that may have been okay for him to do.
yeah.
And I'll cite a couple examples. For one, he was an amateur boxer,
Hmm.
and one day he just said he's not going to box anymore, although I think mom may have had some influence on that because now he had 3 kids, and it
Yeah.
probably wasn't wise that he was still fighting. uh, but he turned around and he started a promotion company
Yeah.
to bring boxing into his hometown, and I was right there by his side, like the contract signings at the actual event.
Yeah.
I was right there in with him, and seeing him interact and seeing company frame up, tear down, that was great. And then
Hmm.
he really instilled this uh, value in me that if you wanted to do something, you could achieve it. It was just
Yeah.
a matter of laying down your plan and executing it. And
Yeah.
it's interesting because I follow that exact path today. And I did
Hmm.
for most of my life, except I just was too drunk and not, I wasn't sober enough to
Yeah.
actually execute well. So as I started to venture out of high school, uh, it it was almost immediate that I entered into an entrepreneurial life. I was not going to be confined by the chains of you're going to go to school for this many years and then you're going to get
Yeah.
out and then you're going to work for, I just couldn't comprehend a life like that. I was going to set my own path.
Yeah, people are part of the programming is to help others achieve their dreams while you put yours aside. So um, I always tell people, find your dream, man, find your passion and be passionate about it. The other things will come in place. Don't worry about it. So here you are. At what age, as you said, you had adopted that entrepreneurial spirit from dad? At what age did you introduce the alcohol into your life? Because what is happening, even though you're moving through life, there's still this undercut, if
Mm-hmm.
you will, of the abandonment that we had
Mm-hmm.
labeled it as before. Those things never go away. They're always sitting there and having conversations with us as we're moving through. At what age did you introduce the alcohol to assist in quieting the voices as they were getting louder, telling you certain things?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that it happened when I was 18.
Yeah,
Amazingly, I made it all the way through high school, even though being exposed to those things, I did
yeah,
not. I was a good kid by all measure.
yeah.
Uh, and so, uh, I mentioned that I am bipolar, and what
Hmm.
began to happen is though that the mania portion of that started to overtake me a little bit as I got into college, and as I,
Yeah,
18, 19, and alcohol would just kind of tamp it down. And
yeah.
so that kind of muted those voices and kept me on a path. And I continued on that, pretty much maintaining for about the next 10 years of my life until my,
Hmm.
late 20s, mid to late 20s, where I was able to just drink enough to not really ever get super drunk, but just enough to keep me on a path.
Yeah.
And so as I'm moving through this space, when I'm 21, I actually met my father,
Hmm.
which was maybe the best and the worst decision I could have possibly made with everything else that was going on in my life.
Yeah.
Uh, because then suddenly I felt like I was being torn in two different directions.
Yeah.
I have all this loyalty to my dad who invested so much time in me, and then I have this man who created me.
Yeah.
And how do you work
Manage
through
that.
that in your head and
Yeah.
manage that in your
Hmm.
head? And it's tough. It really
Yeah.
is, because you start to feel like you're letting one of the two down for
Yeah.
some reason.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
a tough place to be, um, especially at your age as well, that age coming up where you're still in the midst of finding self, and locating who you are as an individual, and loyalties, especially in men, um, is a very powerful force when have to deal with it and confronted with it, and especially as two men, meaning dad and dad.
Yeah.
Um, that is a tough place to be and to try to manage yourself there. So, as this squeezing begins to take place, Matsuma, how did you navigate, man? Did you bring in more alcohol? What was it that you began to do to figure out this space? Because it is a tough place to be. And a lot of men out there, if you're having this conversation, you may be in the middle of something like this. And because it is a common thing in today. So talk to that one that's listening, Massimo. You were there, how did you begin to navigate yourself at 21? Now, you got to remember that you're in your 20s, figuring out this emotionally charged environment.
Yeah, I tell you, and you don't, there's no manual for life, of course,
Yeah.
and so you're out there trying to figure these things out for yourself. What I did was I laid down very strong rules that
Hmm.
neither one of them could talk about the other. That was
Hmm.
for some reason in my mind, I thought that that would help me so that I couldn't have either one run the other into the ground. That
Yeah.
way I could maintain some semblance of separate relationships with both of them.
Yeah.
And I did the same. I ensured that I never spoke about the other to the other. And
Boundaries.
I set that boundary like
Yeah.
immediately. And especially with my father, who I had known my whole life, I made
Yeah.
it very clear to him the first time I met him. I said, if you ever say anything about my mom and dad, I included my mom in this because I
Yeah.
didn't want him to run her into the ground for something that happened 21 years ago. That wouldn't be
Yeah.
fair,
Yeah.
right? I wasn't there.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's between them.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so, and he adhered to it completely. And there's kind of a longer arc story to my relationship with him. He passed away last year, very young. He was only 68, and it's kind of unfortunate that occurred so young, but it really kind of ended that part of my story in a way,
Yeah.
and in a very good positive way. So there was a lot of tumultuousness between the sides, really,
Yeah.
over the
Yeah.
next decade, because both were trying to fight for my attention. And you bring up a good point. This is complex with men. There's
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
It really is, and you don't realize how complex it is until you're in the middle of
Yeah. I'm sure.
it.
I'm listening to it, and as you mentioned it, I could see this. Um, I can see some stories there, and I know you have some. So here you're moving through your life with this young man. He has both of these men in his life, and you're moving through. How, what was happening to you, man? What was happening to you personally, having all of this stuff? You have the alcohol in. What was happening in your world, in your mind, when you were laying down, when you were by yourself? None of them were there. What were those thoughts that you were wrestling with? And also, you mentioned that you're bipolar, so you're dealing with some stuff, man. How were you managing you?
I began to focus all of my energy and excess time into building companies or trying to build companies.
Hmm.
And, in retrospect, looking in the rearview mirror, part of the reason that I had mixed success and failure was exactly that, because of my bipolar nature.
Yeah,
I would go into huge work manias for a year and build, something incredible, and it looks like everything is going great, and then I would have this streak of massive depression, and my business would just like collapse out from underneath me.
Yeah.
And so that was a big struggle, and I felt very alone. I you know, when I did have a steady relationship, I
Hmm.
never was that present for it,
Yeah.
and I had some incredible women come into my life that were, I think, in some ways trying to save me from me,
Yeah.
but I didn't want to listen to them either,
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm going to figure this out.
Yeah.
I've got it. And so I really, what I began to do was drink more. As things
Yeah.
really got too much, I would drink alone, and that's not healthy. And then I
Yeah.
would try to hide the drinking,
Hmm.
and a lot of people did not realize how bad it got. I mean, we're still like talking about in my 20s. I still pretty much was okay. Nobody really had any idea that I was consuming a fair amount of alcohol and getting drunk 2 or 3 times a day. I
Yeah.
mean, two or three times a week,
A
rather.
week. Yeah. Yeah.
And 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 that eventually in my 30s became. There was a stint in my late 30s where I was drunk for about 5 years. I can tell you for a fact, I was never sober. Probably, may have sobered up overnight, but like
Yeah.
I drank immediately in the morning, and so it went from manageable to unmanaged.
Yeah. It's always as we try to quiet the mind, there's always more. We need to consume more, whatever that vice is, because the voices are getting louder and louder, and so we have to increase the volume and the amount of stuff. Sometimes we mix things. I know what
Yes,
I'm talking about.
yes,
So we become scientists and chemists,
yes,
start
yes.
trying to figure out all the balance. But what I've learned is, most people are pretty good actors. We know how to play the role, if you will, as far as the worker. The When we're home, we know how to dress up real good. When we get to the office, and then when we get home, we know how to dress down real good too. So
Mm.
we're pretty good actors, most of us, and we go and live our lives many years, like you just mentioned. Your whole 30s were before you know it, you were gone. And so when you were there and you passed your 30s, what was the incident that came into your life that caused you to um, stop, if you will?
Yeah.
Something comes in and boom, hits you, and you're like, wait a minute. And I call that space, like I tell people, we become the perpetual investigator of the self. How did I
Yes,
get here? What just
yes.
happened? I'm on this cycle. I'm on this loop. And that's when we began to have the first time, I believe, in my life, when I began to become honest with me, was right there. And I realized I didn't have control of this stuff. I need to find a way out. What was the incident that brought you to that realization where you had to stand face to face with you?
Well, this is a kind of wild story in and of itself.
Yeah.
So, um, I ended up randomly meeting a girl, Samantha Thomas, on
Hmm.
a beach in Destin, Florida. And what followed was a romantic relationship where she
Yeah.
saw that I could be fixed, and basically set out to fix me. Um, I mean, I listened to her, but I wasn't quite ready to fix myself. I mean,
Yeah.
she was the pattern interrupt. She
Yeah.
initiated that pattern interrupt where I finally looked at myself in the mirror and said, boy, I really don't like me and I need to do something about it, or I'm probably not going to be here much longer.
Yeah.
And so shortly after I met her, about 6, 8 months later, I lost everything. At this point, I was homeless.
Yeah.
So here we are. It's the beginning of 2015. The only thing I have left in my possession is my car,
Yeah.
and I'm living on the streets of Kansas City.
Mm.
And through that period, I didn't always have a phone, but I got a PO box, and Samantha kept writing me letters.
Hmm.
and asking me questions. Like one letter that she wrote me, she said, "When you want to have a drink, what happened just before? Write everything down and send it back to me."
Yeah.
I mean, she was like this like psychiatrist by mail, like instead of sit on my couch, it was write me a letter, you
That's
know.
beautiful. That's beautiful.
But it worked. It
Yeah.
actually it worked, and so I went into some dark places over the course of 2015. In August of that year, I ended up getting arrested for a DUI,
Hmm.
and I was 0.429 was my BAC, so like eight
Wow.
times the legal limit.
Yeah.
I'm thankful that I never hurt anybody
Yeah.
when I was drinking and driving, but I ended up in the hospital. I ended up flatlining
Wow.
for over 6 minutes. I'm lucky to be alive today.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you would think that would have been enough to like completely reset me, but it wasn't.
Oh, it's always the beginning.
Yeah, but I think it was a bigger catalyst,
Yeah.
and so then March of 2016, I just kind of felt, well, actually, Samantha said to me, "I don't think God is going to give you a third chance, so you might want
Yeah.
to really begin to take this seriously and like
Yeah.
really focus in on everything we've talked about." And then ultimately, I called her and I said, "I'm not going to drink anymore," and I haven't since. That was March
Yeah.
23rd of 2016.
Wow.
Yeah. And so then it became the climb out, like I stood up. I went to work at Kubota Tractor and
Hmm.
the lowest level I could possibly be, which was just picking orders at a warehouse in Edgerton, Kansas.
Yeah.
And within 4 years, I was the general manager of that facility.
Wow. That's a powerful story. I tell people, um, some of us have to go. I grew up in church, and I remember the story with the prodigal son always stuck with me pretty much because I turned out to be one like him, and some people just have to go and eat with the pigs, meaning that
Oh, yeah.
we got to go to the bottom before we can even see up. But when you're there, there's a couple of opportunities that are, can be afforded to you. You could stay there, or like that kid, he said, you know what? Servants in my dad's house, they eat better. In your situation, you looked at your situation, you said, you know what? I need to get out. And I tell people that space right there is, I call it that statement that you make. I said you need a statement of faith. And the reason why I say that to people, I said, you have to believe this thing more than anybody else on this planet. It doesn't matter. It's not, that statement is for you. It's not for no one else. Because what will happen is that you will begin to take the steps to make what you just said necessary. And you recognizes that, one step at a time. So you started at the bottom. That kid got up and started walking back to the father's house, that he took his money and left and said, I don't want anything to do with you. Now, I always tell people that that walk is a humbling walk back.
Yes.
And one have to recognize your shortcomings. You have to recognize that I blew it. I did it. And as you begin to walk back, I tell people it is one of the most humbling journey back. And you just describe yours as, but the thing is, the food is over there. I don't want to eat with the pigs. And so you take the necessary steps to get to where you are because you made a statement that changed your life. As you began to rise up and you're bringing in tools to assist you now to make sure that your mind and your thoughts are being able to, you're managing them and not that pull when you see the model. Talk to us as you're walking this journey uh, from the lowest position back to management. But I want to know about you. What How did you manage yourself? What was the conversations you were having with you while
Yeah.
you were moving forward, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of difficult conversations,
Yeah.
and I really believe that most people don't want to go to the dark places within themselves.
Yep.
And
I
when I
agree.
talk with people that are really struggling to get sober again, they don't want to look in that mirror. They do not want to really see the darkness that is within. And that is where it starts. That's where that
Yeah.
journey story starts. And for me, I had to really dig deep and figure out where is the genesis? What is the genesis of
Yeah.
my pain? And that took a lot of searching. I at the end of the day, I believe that everyone has a singular point or a singular item that causes their
I
drive. What
agree.
drives them, right?
What did you find when your singularity? What did you notice, and what was the nexus that began that once you saw it, and what began to cause you to move?
Sure. Well, I mean, we've already touched on it.
Yeah.
Abandonment ended up
Hmm.
being where it was at. And once I recognized that, I began to look at all of my relationships, like
Yeah.
every relationship I'd had, in the frame of what would that relationship have been like if I didn't have the fear that person would leave me.
Hmm.
And that begins to paint a very interesting picture of the history of your life. It's like, oh, I took this action because I thought that this person was going to walk away, and then that caused this reaction in that person, and they did walk away. So it was
Yeah.
like a self-fulfilling prophecy, and I did it over and over and over again, not realizing I was my own worst enemy.
Yeah.
And so that rolled back into confidence and
Hmm.
realizing that I had to have enough confidence to stand on my own without anyone else or any outside, influence into who I am. And so I wasn't able to completely stand up and stand firmly again until
Yeah.
I rebuilt my internal confidence. So
But
that's where I went.
when you found out it was the confidence piece, how did you begin to rebuild your confidence? What steps did you take to start putting, if you will, your your precepts, your thesis together as you are moving through life and bringing different truth and all these different things into your space and recognizing that that doesn't fit. And that dance as you're walking, going forward to where you're at now, what did you start bringing in and what did you try on and as you move through to get to where you are today?
So I went kind of back in time in terms of the thought processes, and I leaned
Yeah.
a lot on Stoic principles.
Yeah.
Wisdom, temperance, justice, courage, the four
Yeah.
guiding principles of
Hmm.
Stoicism. And in doing that, there's a lot of self reflection. What do I need? Where is the strength that I require to get through something? So I
Yeah.
would begin to look at any situation where even if I had the inkling of, oh, I should have a drink, which I didn't really have, but the
Hmm.
triggers were still there. And once I
Yeah.
recognized them, I said, what is causing this drive to do this thing? And then I would reflect on that
Hmm.
and say, okay, I'm 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 thinking X in order to do Y,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so if you got a bill in the mail and it was past due, I'm just throwing out an example
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
and I don't have the money to pay it. I mean,
Yeah.
once upon a time, that was instantaneous shot of Jack Daniels.
Yeah.
I mean, like, we're not even going to think about it. That's what's going to happen. That's not healthy. That is
Yeah.
not healthy. Okay. So, what I had to do is unwind that and go,
Yeah.
okay, what is the correct way to manage this?
Yeah.
I can't pay the bill.
Yeah.
All right. I know when I can pay the bill. So,
Hmm.
I'm going to face it head on. And
Yeah.
facing that head on is picking up the phone and saying, hello, creditor,
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
I can make this payment on this day and this payment on this day.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And then they set that up. And as long as you execute on what you say you're going to do, and that's a
Hmm.
very important thing in keeping your sobriety is always
Yeah.
do what you say you're going to do, then everything worked out. And as I laid down these little pieces it just naturally, that confidence just like swelled up within me
Yeah.
and recognized. And at the same time, what was going on in my work life, going through multiple promotions in rapid fire and watching myself climb,
Yeah.
rebuilt that confidence I needed in my work life. Even though I was working for somebody else, it really helped me believe in myself again.
Yeah. That is a powerful thing to witness. And one of the things the hallmarks in growing up, maturing, if you will, is keeping your word to yourself.
Yes.
It is, you have to do this in order. If you can't keep your word to yourself, how are you going to keep your word to anyone else? So you have to practice those things about you, be honorable to you. And as you are being honorable to you, you will always want to be honorable to someone else. And you will not allow anyone to dishonor you. That's how that exchange
Yes.
works, so that you learn boundaries as you are being honorable to you. And as you are getting to know who you are and respecting yourself, you, believe it or not, you are developing boundaries that you, because you will recognize when someone is being dishonest and are, contrary to what you have been training yourself to be, and you will put an end to it. So here you are, you're progressing, you're bringing in all of these different uh, um, thought patterns and tools into your life, and you're now, as because I always tell people, when that transition starts to happen, because as you get to a place, you realize that this call that is beginning to whisper in my, that started as a whisper a little while, is getting a little heavy. And my comfort where I'm at work is kind of like getting a little uneasy here. But it is a call to servanthood. When you started experiencing that, um, talk to us as to how did it come in, what was that conversation, and when, because you're now going to be writing a book and all of these different things. So this is a sweet journey when you start navigating to that area. How did you feel when those nudges were coming, and what did you do with them?
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is where the story turns somewhat tragic, and it's kind
Yeah,
of the wild twist in my story is that so we're coming into mid to late 2020, and I think that's right in the heart of COVID actually.
yeah, hmm,
And Samantha was in medical school,
hmm,
and she began encouraging me to write a book.
yeah,
And she told me, we can, you start working on it and we'll co-author it. So
yeah,
we'd end up with an MD on the deal as well. Certainly, it would lend more credibility to my
yeah,
whole program, right?
yeah.
Uh, and on August 1st of 2020, Samantha was killed in a car accident by a drunk driver.
Oh, wow.
And it takes the whole story and everything that I was, looking forward to doing and
Yeah,
going out and witnessing and helping others. And really, for a moment, I thought, wow, am I going to be able to do this on my own? This is,
yeah,
there was so much pain already from just losing her, but then it's like all of these future thoughts
yeah,
are they going to occur? Um, so I reflected on that for a bit, but eventually I decided, I'm
yeah,
going to move forward. And it didn't, and when I say eventually, it was more like a handful of weeks, but
yeah,
it wasn't instantaneous, like, okay, I'm going to push forward. And so
yeah,
I did. And, but when the actual turning point of me deciding that I was going to do this and go out and serve others for the rest of my life was when I returned from testifying at the murder trial for, I testified at the sentencing of her
hmm,
murder trial. And driving home from that, I made the decision on the drive. I was like, you know what? This is what I'm going to do the rest of my life. I'm
yeah,
going to go out and I'm going to share this with others and really focus on helping others find their own path and their own flavor of confidence to, build that strength to
Yeah.
really be helpful in society. And you don't have to be someone who is, fighting for your sobriety to find, wisdom in the things that, you and I are both trying to share with the world. I
Yeah.
think that all of us could use a little bit of work, if we really look at ourselves, and we could all improve ourselves and have a much more delightful earth for us to interact on. And that's,
I
I
have
mean,
so much work to do. I can't even tell you.
so yeah,
uh,
so that's where I am now, and you know what? It has become so rewarding. And occasionally,
yeah.
I'll get an email from someone who's read my book, or I'll see someone and they tell me how it's impacted their life,
Yeah.
and that really is touching. That's enough that's like tackling fuel, so to speak. It
Yeah.
makes you want to go out and just, continue to do things. And I feel that that's really a fundamental difference, as you touched on at the very beginning of our conversation, is that when you are capable in life of turning yourself from someone who is a victim of things into someone who has
Yeah.
recovered from their challenge, you do have this innate desire to serve others.
Yeah.
It is really weird, and because I've gone through it myself. I never believed that I would be in this position and feel the way that I do about trying to serve others that I do
Yeah.
today.
Yeah. Most people don't, because the programming doesn't tell us this. This is not a part of the programming that we are brought up with. No one ever tells you that you're going to get married, have a kid, go to school, and become a servant. Look at you, what's wrong with you? There's
Exactly.
something kind of strange about that picture. But this, the servant position is one that one has to discover through your journey, through pain, through becoming humble, broken, finding those areas, reprogramming the brain, your thoughts, your attitudes, your actions, um, all of those things. And it takes work. And it is not a straight line. It's not a linear growth. It's not a linear thing. It is, I tell people, and I use the example of a plane flying from a destination. There's one thing that keeps it and let it know that it's going off course is that compass. What is your compass? What is that statement that is moving you forward and keeping you aligned? Because I want to let you know there's going to be a lot of different types of turbulence that come. There's not just one type of turbulence. There's so many different types of turbulence that show up,
Exactly.
and that pilot has to make the adjustment based on the type of turbulence that they're dealing with, and that is based on the type of situation that you have in your life. No one has a manual for all of that. You just have to, your compass, and you have to, through experience, learn. You have to trust yourself. There's some stuff going on there that you have to be able to. There's training, of course. We look for data. We go into different places and extract things. Um, but then you still have to personalize that extraction and learn how to make the right decision when and where and make the adjustments. But that's life, man. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful place. Invite us in to one of those emails that you had, and maybe you've met someone that you had several conversations with, and you guys have talked about, you know, um, becoming. I always tell people I love that word. People ask me, what are you doing with your life? I tell them, I am becoming.
Yes, yes. I like that.
you know, and when you're having that conversation about becoming, because again, we talked about it, it's a shift in one's perspective. You believe it so much that you see that perspective, but through a conversation and a series of questions, you can begin to shake the earth foundation of someone. Invite us there when the shaking began and they began to, as we talked about, that holy transition, when the shifting of the perspective happened and that light bulb in their eyes opened up. And that is, we get to witness it through Some people laugh, some people cry, some people dance in many different ways because it is an emotional expression when they make that transition. And invite us to one of those as you we talked about earlier, those that holy connection, as they say.
Yeah, yeah. I have one that I've actually known for a little bit now, coming on
Yeah,
almost a year. And you know, I took through the process before my book was out. And this is
yeah,
somebody who was struggling with a lot of health challenges,
mhm,
and would lean into the bottle very
yeah,
hard, and also into cannabis and heroin,
yeah,
and just not in a very good place. And I told her that she needed to really recognize the fact that these are just band-aids over the larger challenge, and that
yeah.
she should be facing her medical challenges head on with what are the alternatives for what's going on with me? Is everything
Hmm.
being done? Or are you just taking one doctor's, look at things? And why are you turning yourself into this? And then having the conversation with her to realize that it's because she had watched both of her parents just give up in
Yeah,
their own life, and had, blue collar family with her dad, and had just decided he got injured and he wasn't going to work anymore,
yeah,
and just so he just gave up. He was a capable man, but and still is, but has decided he's not going to work any longer. And that's hard for her to watch, and so it's why she gave up in her own journey. Well, what's happened now over the last few months, is it's kind of exciting to watch, is that she's not using any substances any
yeah,
longer. She's gotten a second opinion. Her health's beginning to improve, and I see the sparkle in her eyes,
yeah, yeah,
and it's like there's a person in there again, you
yeah,
know, and that's an amazing thing to watch in anybody transform like that. I mean, like it's uplifting, and
yeah.
hearing more of those stories. And just to go back on what you said just before you asked this question, of course, we're not given a manual in life, but if we really listen intently to those of us who have
Oh
succeeded
yeah.
in that journey path and really draw upon that, I think that all of us can find our best path forward, and our best inner peace and progress in life.
Well, definitely we have to model those that have gone through, and we can extract from them through a conversation. Those that are listening to us, and then you guys know how I feel about books. I tell people that buy the books. Massimo has his book, and in within those pages, house power, wisdom, insights that will leap off of those pages and reside within you. But one must become a hearer, as I said, must learn how to transition from one listening as you're reading to when you're reading to meditate on the words and the power that comes with it. And it will free you. And I said, when you are with an author reading that book, you have private time. This is one of those sessions where it's not that expensive, where you have to spend a couple of G's to spend with them. You got you got to book a price of the book, and their voice is on the pages. And as you read it, and you have that exchange in conversation, because it is, you will get your. I always tell them you'll get your insights. You have to become uh, tenacious with you and what you want from the book. And as you approach a book and a conversation with this expectancy, you will get something. If you show up closed up, you're not going to get anything. So I want you guys to buy it, give it to present, because presence is people, because we are all seeking answers. Those that are using all types of drugs, um, I was a fan of those as well. If I could give you a list, I was a pharmacist, as, and the pharmacist mixed all kinds of things together. So,
Yes.
but You have to learn how to come out, and I have someone that knows how to come out, and he can guide you out. And I want to thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment. This has been a powerful stuff. You guys, I'm going to provide everything for you to reach him, and I'm sure he would want to be reached. Those that are in those dark places, that is why he's here, so that you can get someone to hold your hands and turn on the lights for you. So because he's familiar with the room. So I want to thank you so much for coming, Threads of Enlightenment, man.
Thank you so much, Ken, for your time this morning. It's been great.
It's been an honor. Thank you.